Today's reading circles us around the cross with those who watch in the final moments in the crucifixion of Jesus. I am sure that there were those there that wanted to wait and see if anything miraculous was going to happen, especially with this rabbi who was supposed to be the Messiah. Certainly some there considered that there's only one way for God's presence and power to show, and that would be by bringing Jesus down from the cross before death. Whether hopeful or skeptical, these bystanders are unable to imagine the divine outside of these fleshly terms. Still, Jesus does not come down from the cross. Thus, his identity as God's Son goes unconfirmed, at least in that way. Many of those that are there are oblivious to the fact that God's power is being enacted in the very place that they consider it most absent, and they are missing the miracle right in front of them. At the moment of deepest darkness and most bleakness for those gathered there, at the death of Christ, creation seems to testify to the divine in Jesus. When humanity stands silently agape, the rocks speak of the Lord. You see, there's a supernatural response to Jesus' death. Did you catch it in the reading? An earthquake splits the rocks and shakes the foundations. The sky changes, and the temple curtain is torn from top to bottom. This always fascinated me because this is the inner curtain of the temple that separates the presence of God in the temple from the rest of the people. Now, how do you tear something? How do you tear something? From the direction you are, right? If it was torn by people, it gets torn from the bottom to the top. That isn't what happened. The hand of God broke the separation between humanity and God, tearing it from the top to the bottom, making space, making room, tearing apart what's once divided us in this miraculous moment. God tears from above. Scripture tells us that these miracles surrounding Jesus' death leave a stunned, terrified group of guards declaring in amazement that Jesus was the Son of God. Oops. This is the exact statement that got Jesus killed and has exiled his followers out of fear of their own execution. Yet even those there to crucify Christ could not deny what they saw. It seems that God was most dramatically at work at the exact point where human imaginations believe that God is distant. Now, churches turn to the cross, remember the cross, and sing of the cross. What does the cross reveal to us? The cross gives us reason to believe that even when the worst circumstances look bleak, we can anticipate the unexpected and surprising power of God breaking through. I was overwhelmed by the power of the cross when I went to Jerusalem, both times. The sprawling church of the Holy Sepulchre in the old city of Jerusalem covers the place where Jesus was crucified, buried, and rose from the dead. Christians universally consider this to be the holiest place on earth. This is the end of my sermon series that began at the beginning of the summer. Much has been learned through this summer series of trekking the Holy Lands, and now we've reached the end. We've spoken about clothing, food, culture, lore, artwork and artifacts, eschatology, environment, economics, archaeology, architecture, and geography, and now, hold on, we get a little bit of geology. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre covers a limestone hill once known as Calvary, in Latin or Golgotha in Aramaic, and the pilgrims to this place ascend to this deep, curving flight of stairs. The stairs open to a floor level with the top of the rocky outcrop where Jesus was crucified. And there is now space for visitors to kneel and connect with their Lord. There I placed my hand into the hole in the rock where the cross of Jesus stood. I was in such awe that there are almost no words for it. When touching the stone where the foot of the cross of Christ was, I was so deeply moved to touch that cold stone. This stone ridge was left standing by quarrymen because it was cracked, unbuildable. On the right, under glass, you can see prominent fissures and cracks down the rock caused by the earthquake at the time that Jesus passed. Big, deep ruts of cracking. Though there's no evidence of this, it's beautiful to imagine who Jesus was and why he was there as it cracked. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre is giant and it's hard to navigate. It encompasses the top of Calvary as well as the tomb of Christ. You wind through a lot of area up and down the stairs to find these spaces, and yet it's protected by this big dome covering the land. Emperor Constantine first built a church on the site there in the 300s when his mother Helen, a Christian, went to identify and record all of the locations of the holy sites. Her research has benefited generations of faithful believers. Don't you love that? That the scout that found all these architectural sites was some powerful person's mother. Helen found all of these places, and the tomb of Christ is now protected because of this. So you go from the top, where everything is cracked, all of this stone that you touch, that you can only presume is from this earthquake, down to the center of the church. And inside, there's the tomb of Christ. Inside the tomb of Christ, there are two chambers. The outer one holds a pedestal containing a piece of the stone where the angel sat and said, "He is not here, he is risen." Then a very low doorway leads to the tomb chamber. On the right, a marble slab covers the rock bench on which the body of Jesus lay. With all of this stark stone, I left my first visit wondering why we read that Jesus was buried in a garden. Excuse me. Well, I learned that a garden is considered anything green in this desert-heavy area. Last year, I visited at a different time than the first time. The first time, everything was very, very dry, and it just started to be the rainy season. The second time, I came the week after the rainy season ended. Look at the front of your bulletin. This is just, I don't know, quarter of a mile from the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. This is the same type of limestone rock. Look at what it looks like the week after the rainy season ends. Lush greenness, flowers, and all kinds of vegetation spring out of how dry that rock was. Yes, Jesus was in a garden. Jesus was in the garden because he was crucified and buried near the Passover season. And this was the same time I visited. In the picture of the bulletin, we can see what it might have looked like before the church covered everything, what it looks like to see that cracked limestone from the earthquakes, and what it looks like to have vegetation spring up from the rock. Since so much is covered by churches, we can no longer see the natural landscape, and yet we can see glimpses of it around. The natural area of untended land with this limestone footing. There we can see how lush a garden it becomes, just at the right time. With enough rain, even rock can become a garden, which, by the way, preaches to us as well. Thus, Jesus being buried in a garden is described very correctly and clearly in this. So today, I've asked you to consider a few things that might be hard to consider. Was the earthquake what split those rocks? Was there really a garden coming out of stone? This is where faith encounters us. This is where we find Jesus. See, it's hard to sometimes find Jesus when times are tough. when things look as improbable as plants springing from stone, when things are dark and heavy, when the one that you think is the Lord has been crucified. And yet, I think back to this passage today, and I find faith there. See, I will never know exactly what those witnessing the crucifixion felt when they were there next to Jesus. But I know what I felt when I visited the place where Jesus laid down his life out of love and was raised by divine power. And it moved me in ways that go beyond words. When I saw the rock broken from the earthquake, I believed. I walked down the stairs and I saw maybe a 2-story side of the rock with the crack going all the way down. There, I believed. When I felt the cold limestone that held the cross, I felt the weight of my own sin, heavier than I ever have. When I entered the tomb of Jesus, I was speechless, and that's not just because the priest hushed us, but he did. When I looked upon the piece of the rolled stone where the angel spoke of the resurrection, I was overjoyed. Sometimes faith comes in images and pieces and places that defy words. The location of the cross has always been this public place that moves people in personal ways. And so today I preach of the biblical story of those who were first there, those that were in a public place but were moved personally, like the guards. And I preached my own story, me, who was in this public place but was moved so personally. After all, faith is an intimate journey of the heart. And so we all encounter Scripture in a public place. But I pray that each one of you is touched personally, because faith is an intimate journey of the heart. Faith will continue to be an intimate journey of the heart. May your heart be open to the journey, whether it is in times of sorrow, sadness, grief, or times of joy and celebration. May your heart be open, and wherever it might lead you, may you find Jesus accompanying you. Amen.